looked amazing. Looked amazing. We'll have to catch up and compare notes.
Absolutely.
And Jeff Schwartz is here too. Jeff, thanks for presenting. I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago. What a great session. Really, really appreciate that.
Things are hopping, John. I'll just put it that way.
That's great. We need to catch up, the two of us, soon. Yeah. Hey, let's go. I think there are probably some new people on the call. I noticed that Catherine's new on the call. I'm going to call on you, Catherine, to introduce yourself.
All right. What does everybody want to know? What should I cover?
Just your name and what you do and how that's pretty much it. We'll dive into it.
Perfect. Well, it's really great to meet everybody. So thank you for, and especially John, thank you for inviting me and letting me know about this group. I run a marketplace business based in New York City called The Muse that in short is sort of values aligned hiring. We exist to help connect, we have 5 to 8 million Gen Z and millennial candidates every month who come to The Muse, and a lot of them are trying to figure out what do they want to do next. So we connect them with roles at businesses based on the benefits policies, flexible work, company values, company culture, employee experience, all of the things that we believe matter, over and above just job title or comp. And it results in a better retained hire, a more diverse hire, all that fun stuff. So I'm very interested in all of the different things that are kind of changing in the world of work right now, and had a great conversation with John recently and got really excited to learn more about this group. And geographic scope, I saw a question in the chat, primarily US based for now, but not exclusively. I think about 20% of our users are outside of the US. Most of our revenue comes from kind of hiring that is just focused in this market because we're still small and growing company and you can't take on everywhere at once. But we do a little bit, we have an eye to international expansion in the future. And just taking it one market at a time.
Thanks. That's great, Catherine. Anybody else that's new on the call?
John, I'm new. This is Lance Martin. It's the first time joining. I think actually a couple of weeks ago, I stumbled across this meeting invite. I wasn't formally invited, and I think I hopped on and then realized that it may be invitation only and hopped off. But I talked to Diane yesterday and she said, you're good. So I'm here officially now.
Good.
I actually came across or met Barry virtually a couple of weeks ago through a mutual acquaintance, Chris Nealon, who's a friend of mine for many, many years. And primarily I've been in an operations space. I was just talking to Sean. I kind of got my legs underneath me as a Six Sigma black belt at Eli Lilly many years ago. Was fascinated with the people side of change, why it works, why it doesn't, and have spent probably the last decade working with smaller companies and really helping leadership identify their strategic goals and then understanding their human capital and how to take advantage of some of the things right in front of them through culture and leadership development and some of those things. So I've been in operations, but primarily through a people focus working with C-suite leadership. So that's been my background.
That's great. Well, thanks for being on the call.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Lance. Anybody else?
I'm new as well. I'm Rochelle, and I was invited by Barry Matthews and John Younger. I'm in the area of helping businesses to better support freelancers and independent contractors. So in 2018, I did a global study where I was looking at how what are the problems that digital nomads experience when they're working in different far out locations? What's the problems they experience with companies? So I published that just before the first lockdown. And since then, I've been kind of evangelizing to companies that they really need to update their HR policies and their management practices, because they were really designed for a more stable work environment and a more traditional workforce. So I have a podcast called Remotely Speaking Up, where I speak about remote work and all things to do with freelancers and independent talent. And I'm based in the UK and also a lecturer here in HR and international business. And I'm the founder of a company called Crowd Potential, where that's my sole focus, helping companies to better connect with independent talent and to better engage and manage them. So that's me, and I'm happy to be joining.
That's super cool. Thanks, Rochelle. Make sure you put your stuff all you guys, make sure you put your stuff in the chat for sure. Hey, and Barry and Akil, what's up with the fancy outfits?
Can you hear us now? Can you
Yeah,
hear me
yeah,
now?
we gotcha.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Akil is with UST, and UST have been a client of Open Assemblies for quite a while now, and we collaborated in setting up a center of excellence for blended open talent models, which was the feature of a CTW call a few weeks ago, which was a really excellent meeting actually. And we have been shortlisted, or UST have been shortlisted for a Global Sourcing Association award. The award ceremony is directly after this call, so which is why we are dressed up. And as you saw earlier, I will have my bow tie on later, I promise. But UST has been shortlisted for the Change Maker of the Year award. So we are keeping everything crossed that they will win. They deserve to win because they've taken such a pioneering approach to the use of a blended talent model within their company. They've got 33,000 awesome employees, but they've now got access to hundreds of thousands of awesome freelancers to supplement and augment their teams, and they've done a great job. Or Akil and the team have done a great job with a bit of advice from us.
That's great. Thanks, Barry. Yeah, good luck today. We'll be thinking about you guys after the call. Make sure you shoot us a note and let us know how it went for sure. Hey, Paul Estes, it's been a long time since you've been on a call. What's going on? I saw in the chat you just launched your new project.
Yes, I did. Expert Link. We're working to put freelance experts in product experiences to revolutionize customer success. So it's been a fun journey. Hung the shingle, I think, in April, and have had really good interest in having conversations right now and getting some beta partners and getting it up and running.
That's great. Well, welcome back. And if you guys, hey, Paul, do me a favor and shoot a link to your newsletter so that people can subscribe. So I think it's one of the better newsletters for the industry and got a lot of subscribers and good communities.
Just so everybody knows, it is created by a freelancer in Ghana, Africa, named Tim, who's amazing. So I just want to give a shout out to Tim in Ghana, Africa, who's a data scientist. And in 147 weeks, he has not missed one deliverable. So anyway, I don't want to it's my newsletter, but man, couldn't do it without a freelancer named Tim. So I want to give credit where credit's due.
That's great. And David, I know it's been a while since you've been on a call too. I mean, you were so foundational in creating this organization, back when we did those, we did those kind of design sprints. What are you up to right now?
So yeah, when was it? September 2020, I joined a company called Lonza. It's a contract manufacturer in the life sciences area. So we make drugs for big pharmaceutical and small pharmaceutical companies. We're making the vaccine that many of you have probably taken for Moderna. And I switched focus. So I went from this whole world of work where I was leading this at Novartis into capital or CapEx procurement, where actually 3/4 of my team, I have 50 odd people, are freelancers, contingent workers. So I'm now on the sharp end. Rather than selling the concept, I'm using it. So I'm a customer of what I was selling before.
That's
so
great.
I get to see it from the other side, which is nice as well.
Yeah. How's it going?
Really, really busy. A bit crazy, to be honest. And getting talent, finding talent and keeping talent is certainly one of the big challenges of our job. I mean, the supply chain, that's crazy stuff as well, but we're successful if we have good people, and finding good people and keeping hold of them is probably, it's not unique to what I'm doing, but it's certainly a challenge.
Yeah.
The market's really hot. There's a lot of investment in the pharmaceutical industry. It's very hard to find good people. And so I spend a lot of time scouring.
I'm sure.
Scouring the world for talent that could come on board and help us deliver our projects.
That's great. Well, keep us informed and welcome back to the call for sure.
Thanks.
Hey,
it's great to be here.
Is Steve Rader still on the call? I don't see him.
I am.
Oh, there you are. What's happening? I know you brought a bunch of people, and I saw all these kind of press releases that people had won these huge $175 million contracts at NASA. And
Yeah.
how's that going? How's the whole new
It's like Oprah, right? You get 175 million, you get 100.
Exactly.
No, so just to clarify, it's $175 million cap on a multi-vendor IDIQ. So there is $175 million capacity on that contract, but not the funds. But yeah, we increased our NASA Open Innovation Services to multi-vendor contract to from 19 crowds to 32. So 13 new crowds on there. So we're really excited about that. And we are excited that the cap was raised from 25 million to 175 million because we have a lot of work coming our way from all the different federal agencies. So
Wow, it's incredible.
And we're doing some new stuff with open talent, which I'm excited about. We think we're going to actually be able to have someone badged with a contract badge to be able to access this. That's a huge deal for us to be able to have somebody work from the freelance world into a kind of provision system like that. So exciting kind of baby steps we're doing. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys have always been at the cutting edge, and it's super cool to see that continue. And I'm psyched that the group of contractors, it seems like a really nice diverse group that's come in, the newer contractors. So congrats on that.
And John,
yeah,
one thing I'm just going to drop in a chat real quick. Just wanted, guys might find this interesting. There's been a lot of press recently on how more organizations are using freelancers, not necessarily just to replace workers, but as pathways to hire. And there was a great article we shared that one of the college students shared about how they used freelancing as a path to get a full-time role at Ernst & Young. So just thought people might like to hear that.
Awesome.
So people, again, it's not about freelancing as a replacement, but could be a complement.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jeffrey. Hey, John Healy, I know you got the chance. I haven't even actually been at the lab, the new offices yet. And you dunked me on that. So how was it? How's the new lab with Jen and the crew?
Yeah, it was really cool. So I was up in Boston, still in the airport, so apologies for any background noise. But after doing a keynote, I got a chance to run over with Ashley Bowden, who many in the community know, and Dan Beck from Utmost, and a couple of folks on his team. And we got to spend some time with Jen, kind of walk through the environment, some of the things that are going on, some of the projects that they're taking on there, and just get a sense of the environment. They're set up right inside the School of Engineering there in Harvard. Really cool building set up. I think we all saw it when we saw the annual report that they put out. Gave a nice picture of this new campus. But Mark 1 sitting downstairs. So if you want to see where computing began, you get a really cool sense of that. But just very generous by Jin and his team to spend time kind of taking us through things. So it was really, really good.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to do that. Hey, Colleen, I know Nithyia was going to be a few minutes late to the call. Are you guys going to present together, or is she going to present?
Yeah, we'll co-present. She should be on in about 3 or 4 more minutes. So if we're able to wait 3 or 4 more, I think Alejandro and maybe some others were also new today. We can wait for her, but if we're done here, I'm happy to kick us off.
Yeah, no, let's jump off Alejandro, it sounds like you're new as well. So anybody else that's new, let's finish this up.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Alejandro Puilas. I'm part of Kelly OCG in the product development organization. I lead up services procurement specifically. Been with Kelly for about 6 years, doing consulting and procurement. Prior to that, I spent 15 years at Kraft Foods and supply chain. So good to see a couple of friendly faces. John, always good to see you. So thank you for the opportunity to join you guys here.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man. Who else? Anybody else? No? Well, Colleen, why don't you start, maybe give us some background. I really appreciate, this is kind of usually we kick things off a little bit earlier in the call, but I know Nithyia, who's going to present today, is running a little bit late, should be here in a couple of minutes. So, but Colleen, you and I had such an amazing conversation yesterday, and I really enjoyed the research that you just came out with on fluid talent. It really, I think it's a nice build on the great stuff that, that Jeff and the guys did with MIT and on the workforce ecosystems. So.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks all for having us here. We're thrilled and appreciate the intro as well. By way of context, I guess Nithyia and I work with BCG's Henderson Institute, which is sort of our internal strategy think tank focused on the future of work and new talent models. So we still spend a lot of our time doing client consulting, but we get to take about 1/3 of it and actually dedicate that to thought leadership and engaging in projects and research that are a little bit pre-commercial or more at the leading edge or ahead of where some of our client work is, so that we can bring that insight back and help our clients create some advantage. So we get to do a lot of fun stuff and work with a lot of really interesting collaborators as part of that. The perspective we will bring comes from a couple of angles. A lot of our core client work, probably similar, Jeff, to a lot of Deloitte's, is focused on enterprise clients. So we do a lot of work with companies that are facing the same things, and many of you are working with in your contracts around how do we better acquire and retain talent. And we've seen this like shocking gap, right, between 78% of CEOs saying it's their number one priority and the actual investment and pace of change and how companies are innovating and doing this. We've worked with a couple of data partners to look empirically at things like internal lateral mobility levels and how those have changed. And the fact is that there are a couple of companies that are starting to pull ahead. And in fact, many of you are on the call or working with those companies. But at a macro level, we're still looking kind of at pockets of innovation and have this opportunity to try to do a little bit more innovation at scale and help companies get there. So that's the vantage point that we'll primarily bring. And we'll look forward to sharing with you a couple of the observations from our most recent report on tapping into fluid talent, which is what we define as kind of that full spectrum of talent sources from on demand all the way through to unlocking internal hidden talent and maybe looking at acqui-hiring or corporate borrowing, sharing resources with other companies as ways to meet some of those needs. I'm going to skip Nithia's intro because she'll be on in about 1 minute and I'll let her introduce herself. But maybe I'll just take you through a little bit of orientation on sort of our recent work and where we're headed.
And Colleen,
yeah, sorry
to interrupt. I think it'd be really good because I was really impressed with that paper that you did with Joseph Fuller. What was it, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago? That was really
2 years ago now. It's almost, I don't know, almost out of date. It's amazing how quickly the world changes.
I know, but I just love the way you laid out the framework in that. I don't know, could you drop that into the chat or a link to that?
Yeah, really cool. Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll pop these two first ones into the chat. Yeah, that's the building the on-demand workforce and rethinking the on-demand workforce are kind of two outputs from the same set of research where we looked at how companies were using on-demand talent and also defined some different models, right? From like crowdsourced innovation to more filling different like niche talent gaps for doing that. Some of the findings from that, I think, hopefully some of this will have moved in the last couple of years. But what we found so interesting there was that almost every Fortune 500 company is using on-demand talent, but they don't know how much, and they don't necessarily have a strategy for how and where they're doing it. So it's the same thing we're hearing on the flip side from a lot of the vendors that they're working with, that they're kind of hundreds and hundreds of users within a single company that are tapping into them, but it's not aggregated. There's not necessarily a process for figuring out, are they using that in the right places, et cetera. The other thing that I think was kind of interesting from some of that work is that there's a big gap between sort of very senior leadership, like the CEOs saying, yes, we absolutely believe this is key to competitive advantage in the next 3 years and we'll do more of it, and the investments that they're making, and then also people who are a little bit deeper down in the organization.
Do we lose Colleen?
He frozen.
I think some of this open talent concept and your talent kayak, John, is trying to solve, but then also things like how do we make sure it's the right person? How do we teach our managers to work with them and to break the work down into components to actually get the most value from this? So my big takeaway is there's kind of a navigation opportunity that goes beyond just accessing to understanding a little bit more strategically where different models make sense for that workforce. But I'll put links to both in the chat and welcome feedback or other thoughts on those as well.
Great. Thanks.
This year, more recent pieces are on this sort of $12 billion opportunity in HR technology, which just takes a quick look. I think in the last year, 12 billion in venture capital was invested in HR tech, which is something like 3 times the rate or 3.5 times the rate of previous investment. So we get some pushback and some concerns from clients who are progressive in other areas of their business where they say, we haven't seen people doing this at scale. What makes you think that this is a real opportunity? Is it niche? And I think part of our answer to that, at least, is, it's nascent. Some of the technologies that can help you to leapfrog and do some of these things more at scale have really been invested in kind of in a big way in the last 5, even 3 years. And that investment and innovation continues to accelerate, but it's still very nascent. And so even the leaders, I think, was it you, Jeff, or someone on the last call mentioned like this cleanup in aisle 9, that the case studies for folks who are actually leading in talent innovation are still managing through figuring out what that model looks like. And I think we would say the same. And then the focus for our conversation today is tapping into fluid talent, which is really focused on how do you look comprehensively across the range of talent sources, and what are the couple of ways that you can start to get as an enterprise from there's a ton out there, it's overwhelming, to a couple of more discrete use cases or starting points to be able to accelerate that talent journey.
Great. Should we wait for Nithyia to do the rest, to jump into the rest, or how do you want to proceed?
I'm just pinging her.
Okay.
Because she is pathologically on time, and I know was going up to 12:30. Otherwise, I will keep us moving.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, as you ping her, I've got a question for you. I think one of the things that I find so interesting, and you and I talked about it yesterday, is it seems like a lot of that $12 billion investment, I mean, a lot of the tech that's being built in the traditional HR space is really tactical tech that we talked about yesterday, right? It's still built on a very much analog business model to marginally improve, analog processes, and not a lot is being spent yet in that kind of what we view as open talent being, the transformational, really kind of platform-based networked, networks, ecosystems, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree with that broadly. And I think what's interesting is that we're seeing a lot of point solutions. So it's sort of like with every 10 million invested, there's one new offering, which means rather than having 200 companies, you have thousands of companies that are each doing very narrow slices of the solution in some sense, which is where I like kind of the work that Deloitte does around, figuring out what is the future of this talent ecosystem. Because my sense is there are a couple of companies in that tech landscape that are pretty strategic in their thinking, and their roadmaps are not, don't require that they own the whole thing, right? Like they're very thoughtful about where they're integrating, what are kind of the set of, I think some of the talent platforms have very thoughtful roadmaps around where are they starting to integrate with other L&D providers. But the kinds of things that we're not seeing, and we did a survey of 100 or 200 HR and business leaders around their pain points in this talent management tech value chain. The kinds of things they're struggling with are still, match quality. The match quality is not good. We have no ability to actually staff teams, right? So as we're working with third parties, we're kind of getting an individual here or there for a project, but we'd love to be able to actually have somebody curate a team for us in a consistent way that we could bring on where we need that capability. And then trouble assessing the quality of providers. And then finally, like this ability to match across or look across internal and external talent, which John, you mentioned some companies that are doing some interesting work there and actually building managing on-demand workforce, a more internal talent cloud. But I'd say in terms of what we've got, and the capability that companies are hoping to see more of. I don't know if there are there innovations or other areas where you think there's kind of a lack of focus, or if this is just a function of the maturity of the market as those ecosystems start to form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like the market is still, like you said, very nascent, and lots of headroom for lots of innovation there still.
Yeah. And it kind of makes the, to me at least, it makes the case for some of what I heard from UST, which is the importance of having a little bit of a center of excellence or a way to navigate all of these offerings. Because the fact is that most people who have been in HR for years haven't had to figure this out. And in fact, the offerings haven't necessarily even been there in the same way, right? So there's kind of a new set of capabilities. I want to say HR leaders, only like 15% of them think that they're ready for a digital future compared with 30% of other leaders, which is challenging. Yeah, Jeff, sorry, I see a hand up.
No. So I think this is a really interesting question here, which is, I think, something that we might look at even over the next few months and the next year, which is whether or not calling what we're doing HR tech, or is it actually something else? And John, by your question, I mean, part of what we're doing in HR tech today is optimizing HR tech.
Yeah.
We're primarily optimizing it by making it a little bit better on the cloud, a little bit better on mobile, and trying to apply AI, but largely to apply AI to do better what we've previously been doing and to do it with fewer errors, which is an optimization play, which is absolutely critical, but it's only a subset of what we're looking at. And then, there's a very large piece outside of that, which is all the other stuff that we're doing, all the new stuff that we're doing. Colleen, as you're mentioning, using teams as the basis of analysis is a great example. Using actually skills and interests and careers as a basis of analysis, because HR tech has historically had a very narrow, I'm not being critical of it, but a very clear set of lanes in which it's been running. And one of the opportunities that I think we have, John, as a community, is to explore, like, is it HR tech? And the work that we're doing with Deloitte and MIT, we're talking about workforce tech and work tech and workplace tech, and what are these categories and how do they work together? So I think there's a really interesting question here that sort of even put on the table when you say there's a $12 billion market. What is the market? Is it HR tech, or is it HR tech plus?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think, the goal here, at least at CTW and OA, is to create common language and common processes. And I think that's why these conversations are so valuable, to get us all aligned around some few principles. Hey, Brian, why don't you ask your question? But I know Nithyia is here as well. And so we'll jump into the presentation right after your question, Brian.
Yeah, cool. I just wanted to make sure that I'm just curious, Colleen, about, as you're looking at this research, how did it translate to different types or levels of opportunity for traditionally diverse or disadvantaged groups? I think one of the things that really is interesting about enabling technology is it kind of widens the net for a lot of people who may get overlooked. So I'm curious if you see any sort of data in this research that would translate to that being true.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's one of my personal passion areas, and I think Jeff and others may have some views too. Yes, so one of the other pieces, it's not this tapping into fluid talent report, but we'll have a piece coming out in a week or two about how internal talent mobility specifically can enable greater gender equity. I mean, I think in principle, right, there's sort of like some clear mechanisms by which technology can help. You can make opportunities available to everybody. So historically, special project opportunities, which are a big prerequisite for leadership positions, have been sort of handpicked behind closeted doors. If you're actually posting everything and making it visible to everyone, by its very nature, you're starting to increase that opportunity. The other thing, and I think a lot of the Gloat customers and other talent marketplace customers we're speaking with, is they're actually changing the role of line managers in internal project opportunities. So an employee is not necessarily required to get any sort of approval. So those sort of barriers to browsing and exploring new opportunities are a little bit lower. And then the other thing is that the sort of basis for matching, naturally we sort of shift to who we know, especially for a priority project, because we trust them. But some of these technologies enabled by AI, and where people are actually creating their own preferences and putting those into the system, give you a better ability to match based on skill aspirations and growth opportunities, as well as recognized or sort of inferred skills that someone might have based on their work history and training history. So I think all of those mechanisms combine together, and we're starting to see results from Gloat and from other talent marketplaces where gender equity and sort of matching of people to opportunities through those platforms looks a lot better than what we see in sort of the broader market. I think there's similar applications for technology sort of in other spaces of this fluid talent spectrum, but that's the place where I'm closest to the data. Would be interested if others have views or experiences here as well.
That's great, Colleen. Hey, Nithyia, welcome. Sorry we missed you earlier. Could you just introduce yourself maybe, and then I'd love for you and Colleen to jump into the report.
Perfect. We'll jump in here. So Nithyia Vaduganathan, Managing Director and Partner with BCG. Been with BCG since 2005, and I'm a core leader in our people and organization practice, as well as our education practice. And over the last couple of years, I'm a fellow with the Henderson Institute, which is our think tank, and the area of my research and focus has been on future of work, specifically new talent models. So we'll talk about sort of our concept around fluid talent, and we've gone deep in areas like strategic freelancers, the internal hidden talent that Colleen just talked about, but also, starting to think through, how do we really help organizations unlock sort of fluid talent or talent advantage at scale, right? And that's certainly part of it, is sort of using HR tech in a more strategic way. And HR tech, certainly to the earlier comments, is more expansive across that whole value chain. But it's not just that, right? It's also broader operating model change. So it's really exciting to be with you all. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Great. So let us take you briefly through some of the highlights of the research, and we can keep the discussion flowing live in parallel if that works. One of the things that may not be surprising to you, but it's kind of interesting to see empirically, is that if we look at which companies are actually going beyond traditional talent acquisition channels, despite almost all of them saying that this is one of the top priorities, fewer than a third are doing it in any meaningful way. And this is based on sort of survey and interviews with senior business leaders across industries. One cohort stands out for innovating more here, and it is your sort of leading digital natives who are innovating at twice the rate of other companies, and in fact, seeing returns at a macro level from doing that. So we see 3 times higher total shareholder return among that small group of companies that is disproportionately innovating on talent compared with others in the market. At a macro level, I think there are a range of benefits, and it depends a little bit which archetype or which model of fluid talent you're looking at, but these range from sort of the faster time to fill, from months to weeks or even days for some forms of on-demand talent, diversity and underrepresented populations. I think the sort of cross-functional, cross-geographic, and cross-gender data is pretty compelling. Where I'm personally interested, and where I think we have a little bit less data as a field and in the literature, is other forms, right? Socioeconomic diversity and racial diversity, LGBTQ, I've seen a little bit less data on, but I think conceptually the promise is there, and those are important areas to explore. And then also greater diversity of ideas, better engagement, depending on the model that people are engaging with. When we talk about fluid talent, we're really talking about the sort of strategic orchestration of a range of talent sources, from on-demand workers to unlocking hidden talent in the organization and sort of corporate borrowing, even the use of AI, right, and generative design to help augment how companies are getting work done and driving innovation. I think we won't belabor with examples since this group is living most of them. A couple that I like, I think in the freelance space, NL Energy is another company that's done some interesting things and really transformed its business model with crowdsourced innovation. And they kind of credited their a pretty drastic improvement in share performance to overhauling their innovation model with on-demand talent. The other one that's interesting, and I think folks may be familiar with, Unilever's actually experimented with and sort of done interesting things with every talent source on this page. I think their work on internal hidden talent is especially interesting, sort of moving 9,000 people during COVID to new jobs. I think they've unlocked more than 1 million hours in special projects. And they've actually used this as a jumping off point to introduce some new models. So the U-Work model, where they actually have current employees and alumni opt in to receive a retainer. So these people kind of get a monthly retainer. They commit to working a minimum number of weeks per year, but they're staffed on a project basis. So they're trying to kind of break that compromise between some of the challenges of the gig economy and what they see as the opportunity to retain people who don't quite fit in their traditional working model. And corporate borrowing and buying is another interesting one. Sidecar, I think, actually managed a lot of their European expansion by buying smaller startups in new markets in Europe. We really like the example of Disney Philips collaborating to make a better MRI for children. And then Cisco and Kroger throughout COVID actually did some employee sharing so that they could shift employees across the companies where they had different pockets of demand. There are a lot of people who think about fluid talent primarily as what I see in this first column, which is sourcing hard to find roles and getting talent quickly into the organization where there's a pressing need, a lot of times around technology and digital. I think through our work, we've been really—
Sorry, Colleen, maybe on that one real quick, there's a question in the chat around sort of, you know, where folks sort of thinking about on-demand labor, not just for short-term needs, but sort of as a path to full-time. And I think that's absolutely, there are platforms like TopTal where, I mean, basically part of the offering is the try before you hire, right? And so you plug in folks, and let's say, right, the data scientists, the analytics talent, you like them working well with the team, you pay some sort of referral fee. But when you actually do the math on the net cost of, you know, acquisition for some of these really hard roles, it's actually not that much more, and you've had the chance to actually see if that person sort of works well in your culture. So I think platforms are sort of starting to open up that option. Go ahead, Colleen.
No, it's great, and thank you for, feel free to jump into live with questions. And the other example that's maybe interesting on this page is this for surge capacity. I look at what someone like a Microsoft is doing with Limitless, and Limitless actually helps them recruit brand advocates. So people who love, you know, love working or love using Xbox, get an app on their phone and actually serve as customer service reps. You can ask an expert, and they found not only is this sort of more cost effective for them, but actually the customer satisfaction ratings are as good or higher because you have people who are really passionate about the project managing some of those volumes. So I think we see a range of applications here, and some are better suited to certain industries or functions than others. But really, while we put some illustrations on the page here, we're starting to see more diversity of use cases across functions and across industry areas, I think, as the space matures. So that brings us to kind of the million-dollar question, which is, so how do you actually do this at scale, right? We've talked about a lot of the frictions. There are a couple of ways that we guide enterprise clients to start to activate the potential of fluid talent. The first is, you know, maybe paradoxically focusing and not necessarily trying to do it all at once. So it's about identifying what is that use case that's most compelling, where is there clear value, where you don't have to sell a total talent transformation and network organization to everybody overnight, but there's an immediate need in a certain skill area that you can go deep and really rethink all the way from talent attraction to the sourcing model, maybe even to some extent sort of rethinking what those job roles are and meet that need. And that can be a little bit more of the jumping off point. The second piece is around making a partner ecosystem or looking outward. And I think some of the companies that we've seen more at the leading edge here do actually spend a lot of time in the startup ecosystem. They maybe hire from that ecosystem. They may have leaders who came from spaces that are a little bit more tech or operations oriented in addition to HR, or have moved through both. And they're working increasingly with sort of best of breed providers rather than trying to create everything in-house in order to support those highest value use cases. And then the third piece is around this new, what's your new operating model for fluid talent? I know there's a lot of work around figuring out just simply how to access talent sources and how to get through some of the regulatory frictions. And I say simply, not meaning that it's actually simple, but some of those basic blocking and tackling questions. The other thing that we try to help companies think through is actually how do they need to be working a little bit differently and where in order to make the most use of this talent. And in fact, we've seen that kind of 3 out of 5 of the biggest frictions with some of these fluid talent models have to do with ways of working, how you evaluate talent, how you onboard and set them up for success, how you kind of manage those change with line managers who are used to managing in a certain model in order to get the most value potential out. So those are a couple of the keys that we tend to lead with some of our enterprise clients. And in the interest of time, I might pause there for questions and maybe we take a look at the chat. I'm happy to share a little bit more about some of our upcoming research topics, but I think there's kind of a lot already coming through here. So I want to make sure we use our last 5 minutes well.
Folks have some questions? Just, I can't see because of the presentation. I can't see any hands raised. So just jump in if you've got a question.
I see a thread around, part of the op model work is really around managing the work, right? And we would say we absolutely agree with that, right? The ability to componentize work, right? Define discrete outcomes, which is sort of goes hand in glove with strong sort of deployments of agile models. But of course, sort of every, organization's not quite there on that journey. But those who are, right, or able to focus on that, I think have higher ability to take advantage of whether it's the gig economy or internally, right? When we say lateral mobility, it's actually sort of internally moving folks versus only plugging in your holes with new hires. So I think that very much, resonates as an important enabler.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Steve, it looked like you had a question. Steve Rader.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious. Somebody made a comment that not all these folks are looking for full-time work, right? And one of the things I'm kind of fascinated with is people that do have full-time jobs, but are starting to engage in the gig economy more and more. And I was just curious if you guys saw any of that, both. Clearly you're looking at where they're engaging. I'm curious is if anyone's looking at, are there positive or negative impacts at the companies where they work full-time of them actually doing gig work? Because I have this theory that it actually helps the company because they're upskilling and getting exposed to new industry and the rest. But I'd love to see if anyone has data on that. So I know that's kind of tangential to your study, but just curious if you guys have thought about that and what your thoughts are.
I think if you take examples like NL, right, scaled implementation of really bringing in sort of external talent from an innovation perspective, they would say that it has sort of upskilled sort of a lot of the labor force, right, in terms of like that sort of innovation mindset. And really they've embedded folks from an incentive at every part of that value chain. But that's sort of, right, most organizations are sort of far from the scaled rollout, and it's sort of in pockets, right? And there's, I would say, an equal number of stories of where, freelance use hasn't been that effective, right? But then you start to unpack and you say why, and it goes to sort of the work is not componentized, right? Outcomes are not defined. Onboarding journeys, right? Folks don't have sort of the information and the context to be effective in the roles. So I think there's sort of a long list of sort of some of those, it's not just, okay, great, we found someone for a couple of months, let's plug them in, right? Like they're going to be able to, like being really thoughtful of what are they put on and how do we manage a team with a set of folks that might be more boundaryless over time, right? To drive to an outcome. I do think COVID has acted as an overall tailwind to this, right? So I think it's, overall managers have probably had to, by default sort of up their game in terms of being able to manage more distributed teams. But I think, this has, COVID by itself has raised the need, right, for manager training across sectors. And I think that type of training will also be beneficial as folks are thinking more expansively of talent sources too.
Yeah, I like that. I know Dave Alberts, you had a question in the chat as well. That was pretty compelling. You want to share that?
Yeah, no, my question was, as large companies start, benefiting from and enjoying, is there a requirement for compliance and that overcoming the hurdle? Because, even the people we work with, they don't really tell everyone about it. But once we want to scale this, that the compliance question comes in. Is there any learnings of that or shifts in attitude or relaxation of that compliance?
And so, sorry, when you say compliance in terms of, can you just say more?
Validation and verification of who people are. We work with some of the big firms and they're kind of there's this question of who is this passing to, and how do I know who is who that this is going to, and an issue. It's the elephant.
Absolutely. So I think this, and IP is one that often comes up, right? Sort of the IP hurdles and how do we get folks sort of through all the security clearances to be able to be effective contributors and team members. So I think this goes back to sort of, if it's just in pockets, right, then it's on sort of individual teams and hiring managers to kind of go figure all this out, and they're typically not that well equipped. But I think over time, as you start to have more divisions or more pickup across different parts of organizations, I think you start to see more, you know, whether it, you know, it's often picked up in HR, but it doesn't have to be just HR, right? But little more central sort of support and organization, whether it's, you know, from here's sort of a preferred set of platforms for freelance talent, right? Centrally, so we've already done the legwork and research on that, to here's some common sort of IP or risk mitigation and onboarding sort of techniques, right? Here's a playbook. So each manager isn't having to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Akil and Barry, I know, you know, you guys have been partnering, and Akil, you've been leading the charge on a lot of this kind of work with Diane. And I don't know, you guys always have a really interesting, or Akil, you have a really interesting perspective on it. Could you add something to that, to your journey as in the context of compliance and some of those other things to address Dave's question?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. I think so the challenge of compliance, kind of, it's I think, well, as Diane says a lot, actually, I'm just stealing one of Diane's points, really, that it's all about perceived risk. That's where all the compliance concerns comes from generally. It's all about this idea that, oh, I don't know if I can trust a freelancer. And when we bring up the idea that employees can also be just as reckless with company data as a freelancer might be, there's still this perception that somehow freelancers are more likely to be less compliant with all these security measures. So it's an interesting one, and I'm not entirely sure what percentage of that is delusion or just requires some education, how much of it actually exists in reality. But it's definitely a mindset thing, more so than a operational challenge. That's been our experience, at least.
Yeah, Diane, any last notes on that? I know you've been doing a lot of great work on that as well.
Yeah, no, I think Akil said it very well, right? It's we just you know, there's work to be done to get folks comfortable with the new design of work, right? So redesigning work, we have greater freedom, right, in our ability to design work, which unlocks greater freedom in our ability to redesign the workforce, right? To this team's point, the key is to just very intentionally and methodically walk through every one of those assumptions that are outdated in the way we design work and workforce, right? The compliance, the background checks, right? The IP, all of those assumptions need to be revisited in a very methodical way, because we can start to peel back some of the constraints that governed work pre-digital era and give ourselves greater freedom to capture the benefits of the fluid workforce. But we have to be very intentional, and we have to bring the teams along with us from an educational standpoint. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I noticed we're at time, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, Colleen and Nithyia, for leading the discussion. I think there's so much more to learn here. Really love this group and so much stuff. I think, you know, Diane and Akil and Nithyia and Dave Alberts, that's a really big, meaty place to think about, right? Like, how do we shift this mindset? Because I agree with you guys that I think part of the compliance issue is it's a stumbling block for the current, you know, the current incumbent way of doing things, to kind of make sure that nothing disrupts their way of thinking. And maybe we could have a session just on this to kind of all collaborate together to think through some of the stuff, so we get aligned and we can create some common language around that. So, but always love you guys, and a special shout out to Barry and Akil today. Let us know how it goes. We're psyched for you guys. do us proud up there on stage. And
Thank
and
you.
talk to you guys later.
Special shout out to Diane and Catherine as well. Well, it's awards for all of us.
Good luck. Bye,
You guys are
everyone.
winners.
All right.
All
Thanks
right.
again, everybody.
See ya.
Take care.
Thank